This video is brought to you by Ridge Wallet. I know you guys have heard of them before, and they're sponsoring this video, so stick around to the end to learn more. Weird West. Yeah, okay, so this one's a bummer because I was really looking forward to this one. It's from the newly formed Wolfeye Studios, led by Rafael Colantonio, who was the director of the Dishonored and Prey franchises. He and a bunch of Arcane vets left to set up their own thing because they wanted to keep making games, but they wanted to do it outside the AAA model. In the previews, it's definitely presented as an immersive sim, but from an isometric perspective and in a unique, occult-infused Wild West setting, and I was 1000% down for all of that. Unfortunately, all of those things exist here, but they exist at the most shallow or surface level only. The game has a sandbox that lets you stealth or murder everyone or manipulate the environment to your advantage, but there are very few combat spaces, enemy types, encounter designs, and bosses to engage with. It's little exaggeration to say that your first combat encounter feels almost identical to your last, and in fact, I'd say it feels better since you're experimenting early on and using more of the sandbox to your advantage, where later on, you realize how shallow the singular encounter design is, and you'll settle into very repetitive patterns of play. I might have been able to recommend this to you if the world building, story, or presentation was at all compelling, but it comes across as more thrown together than truly fleshed out. It's an anthology of stories told from the perspective of 5 different characters, but there's so little that connects the cultures that they each represent. You are not eased into this world and its rules. It's like one minute you're shooting cowboys and the next minute you're shooting zombies, and there were a few steps missing that might have got you to the point where you understood that or cared about that. Each of the stories feels like you're stepping in at episode 10 of a 10-episode series, and it's meant to invoke a sense of world building, but it really just invokes disorientation. All of this combined with a repetitive structure and some very half-baked RPG progression make this a very skippable title, sadly. I don't think Weird West is a bad game, but it asks about 20 hours of you, and I don't think it gives you a whole lot in return. There are plenty of CRPGs, tactics games, twin-stick shooters, or immersive sims that you could be spending your time on instead, and Weird West lacks the key distinctive or memorable qualities that you might point to when reaching for a compelling reason to play it. We should probably start by defining what Weird West is, since the exact nature and structure of it doesn't immediately leap out at you when you look at gameplay, and in fact it doesn't become totally clear until you're about halfway through the game. Weird West is, at its most basic level, a narrative-led isometric action game with light RPG elements. There are essentially 5 chapters to the game, and in each of them you take control of a different character, all of whom are capable of using the same weapons and items, but who also have some innate abilities to make them more distinct on the battlefield. So you'll play through Chapter 1 as the Bounty Hunter, and then in the next chapter you'll be playing as the Pigman, pursuing your own unique storyline, that storyline is tangentially connected to a broader meta-narrative. Structurally, it plays a lot like a real-time CRPG, but its more action-y combat can often make it feel like a twin-stick shooter. You begin on a homestead where your son has been murdered and your husband kidnapped. You need to go find him, and as you take those first steps in that journey, you'll meet the overworld map, which allows you to travel to different towns, ranches, mines, etc. On your way, you'll often be interrupted by traveling NPCs, or you'll be set upon by wolves or bandits, so there's always a sense of the unknown whenever you venture forth. You're following a quest chain in each chapter that ultimately boils down to go here, kill or incapacitate some things, collect the things, come back for some exposition. That's how most games work, by the way, so that's not a pejorative description, but I do think that Weird West does struggle to provide meaningful mission variety or quest design or narrative window dressing, so that flow does start to feel very sing-song very quickly. In addition to the main quest, there are also side quests and bounties to complete. Bounties are just kill or capture missions, and they award some cash. Some of them do have some relation to the main quest line, but mostly they're just an injection of cash. Cash that you don't really need since the game's economy doesn't require it, so I found very little reason to do these bounties, and when I did do them, I found they'd often send me back to areas that I'd already cleared, but now I'm just hunting a different target in the same spot, which wasn't very fun. The side missions are more meaningful. They have narrative attached to them and usually involve some sort of morality-based decision-making. Steal the precious heirlooms you find on a corpse or hand them over to their bereaved lover. Give the local farmers the title to their land for free or charge them a princely sum for it. These outcomes are tracked and reported on at the conclusion conclusion of each chapter, with all these decisions adding up to affect the final ending you'll reach. Obviously, the same decision making occurs in the main quest as well, and to the game's credit, these decisions are numerous, but they don't make themselves felt during a playthrough, or at least not from what I could tell. I mean, the very decision to not kill everyone you meet is a decision in and of itself, because this is one of those games where you can do that. Similarly, you can steal things and fall foul of the law. There's a reputation system in play that affects your standing with merchants, or if it falls low enough, then bounty hunters will be dispatched to track you down. Admittedly, I did not push these systems to their limits. I did a good guy playthrough, so to speak, high reputation, making all the good choices. I had people show up during combat to help me out if I had rescued or helped them earlier, so that was nice. But other than that, I really didn't feel the effects of my decision making, except when it came to the end of chapter screens, which would summarize all of my decisions. I do believe that if Weird West is something that clicks with you, there is going to be replayability here. You will be able to make different decisions that will open up different narrative outcomes and expose different tensions with the denizens of the Weird West. For me though, neither the narrative or the core gameplay loop clicked with me on any level, so I don't feel the desire to do another playthrough and push those decision-making systems to their limit. The narrative, setting, and world building was for me the biggest disappointment here, because I think that could have saved this experience had it delivered more. I've played plenty of games with fairly average gameplay, but their world sold me, either the setting, or the characters, or the lore, or the music, or just some random little things that I happen to latch onto. There's nothing like that here in the Weird West, and given how interesting the premise is, that feels like such a waste. So it's set in a creepy version of the Wild West. Cowboys live alongside swamp-dwelling pigmen. Native American tribal spirits are real and possess the souls of men. There's werewolves and zombies and sirens and all sorts of crazy shit. All of those things are cool, but none of them are at all developed or fleshed out or connected to each other in a meaningful way, and the way that we as players are introduced to all of these elements is odd. I remember the first time I saw anything weird in the Weird West. It was some siren ghost thing, and I had no prior warning about it, and then it was just there, and then I killed it, and then I moved on to the next thing. There would have been a moment to introduce the player to this stuff so that it means something to them, but that moment never comes, so all of this strangeness just feels like assumed reading, as though the world expects you to already know its history and rules and lore, even though it's never explained to you. There was no anticipation built up for the introduction of new enemy types or factions, no foreshadowing of threats. It all just seems to appear and then disappear just as suddenly. That's what I meant when I said earlier that each new chapter feels like the final episode in a TV series. You really crave some backstory, some exposition, but it never comes. It feels half-formed, but it also feels disconnected. There are so many forces and factions and powers at work here in the Weird West that you'd think they'd all bump into each other a lot more, fight each other, be forced to live in awkward compromise. It's really not like that though. Every new culture you'll encounter is its own island, totally separated from everything else, and you seem to be the only force that connects them in a meaningful way. I would say there's probably too much weirdness in the Weird West. Had Wolfeye focused on a smaller number of factions or forces and delved deeper into their stories and built more connective tissue between them, you could have arrived at a more convincing and immersive world. Just as I was struggling to connect with the world, I was also struggling to connect with any of the characters in it, particularly the leading characters we're controlling. There's no voice acting in this game, other than a few one-liners from a cowboy serving as the narrator. He'll chime in once every 20 to 30 minutes to summarize major on-screen happenings, but outside of that, zero voice acting. That doesn't hurt every game, but I do think it hurts this one. The overall soundscape of Weird West is eerily quiet, and some voice work over the top of that would have been nice. The major narrative reveals, they fall really flat without at least a little bit of voice work. And I know that this is an indie, and I know that voice work is expensive, but you've got so many interesting looking characters, and characters who come from such interesting backgrounds, just a little bit of voice work would have gone a long way to sell these characters, and make them feel like more than just dialogue boxes. Even beyond voice work, it's impossible to feel anything about the characters you're controlling because they don't say anything. The dialogue you select for them isn't written in their language, their accent, their turns of phrase. It's just menu prompts to denote decisions. Your character can't show any reactions or emotions to things. It's such a waste because you've created 5 characters who each represent a part of the Weird West, but they do so in appearance only because they themselves cannot illuminate any part of the world through thought, spoken word, or deed. Similar to what I said earlier, if Wolfeye had focused on one character instead of 5, I think we would have had a better game. Structured and written the way it is though, the Weird West, its main characters and the supporting cast leave little impression on you even after spending 20 hours with them. Outside of the intriguing setting, I was looking forward to seeing how Weird West would play, given that it seemed like a really interesting mashing of genres and subgenres. It has some CRPG in there with its approach to the overworld, the fact that you have companions fighting alongside you, the perspective, the abilities, the RPG skill trees. It's got some twin-stick shooter elements in there since action unfolds in real time, and there's a big focus on gunplay, dodging, ducking, dipping, diving, and dodging. At any time, you can slow the action down with a fancy bullet time thing as well, bit of Max Payne in there for you. Finally, there's that immersive sim element that these developers are known for, combining your character's capabilities with environmental manipulation to approach combat in a variety of ways, from pure stealth to dusk till dawn level carnage to everything in between. So those are the elements: CRPG, twin stick shooter, immersive sim. So, how do they work? They're okay. I would say that Weird West offers a very surface level take on each of these things, and the combination of them here does not produce something greater than the sum of its parts. From a CRPG perspective, it's a little frustrating that Weird West doesn't take its ideas further. For example, you can recruit 2 members to your posse at any time, either random people you meet or the characters you controlled in previous chapters, and they still have their abilities and weapons that you procured during your playtime with them. So that's cool, but then you realize that there's no way to control these characters at all. And then you learn that you can buff their stats really easily and they become these invincible turrets that soak up a huge amount of damage while also dealing lots of damage themselves. They also get in the way sometimes when you're trying to stealth or trying to shoot a target. My god, I shot my own dude so many times. They also use their abilities at random and inconvenient times. If you had some control over these other characters, position them in certain locations, control when they use their abilities, you would have had a slower combat experience, but a much deeper one. Weird West feels most comfortable if you play it as a twin-stick shooter, I think, though even then it's a little awkward. I tried it on keyboard and mouse and it didn't feel great at first. So then I switched over to a controller, and even then I still found it quite tricky to aim. Certainly a lot more snap to on targeting would have helped. The reason for this is that the control scheme you're using is really convoluted. To use one of the special attacks with your rifle, for example, you first need to equip it, then you need to hold down the left trigger, then press the corresponding face button that appears, which primes the ability, and then you aim the weapon, and then you fire. I know that doesn't sound like much, but trust me, this game is often asking you to respond on the fly to split-second changes on the battlefield, and the control scheme it gives you acts as more of a barrier than an enabler. A more fundamental challenge with the action side of the game is that the act of shooting stuff never really feels that different from encounter to encounter. There is some enemy variety, but most enemies will just run at you in a straight line, so you can just walk backwards and shoot them with whatever weapon you happen to have ammo for. It'll always work. As an immersive sim, Weird West certainly delivers on the promise of you being able to approach combat in a variety of ways, absolutely. But each of those combat archetypes is fairly limited. I've already spoken about the whole guns blazing approach thing, and it works, but it does lack depth. If you were to play all stealth, you can easily do that because the game is well set up for it. I'd argue perhaps too well, because enemy AI is really dumb. Their vision cones extremely narrow and short, their hearing very limited. Stealth feels very gamey, so while you can do it, I didn't find it a particularly satisfying way to play. I should also mention that the majority of combat abilities that you can purchase or use are about killing things. That naturally pushes you towards that pattern of play, so a similar investment in stealth abilities would have been nice. There are opportunities to manipulate the battlefield to your advantage. Conveniently placed dynamite kegs can be kicked toward enemies and then detonated with your revolver. Conveniently placed oil drums can be spilled and their contents set alight. You can lure enemies with the sound of thrown bottles. It's all pretty basic stuff. There's always going to be an exploding barrel somewhere nearby for some reason, and if you want to do something with that, you can, but the whole setup doesn't feel very organic or interesting. We've seen all this stuff before, many times, and Weird West is just exactly that again, without adding anything on top of it. I mentioned earlier that your first encounter in game kind of feels like your last, and yeah, it absolutely does. Within the first 30 minutes, you've seen the full gamut of this game's environments and environmental elements. It's not like new ways to manipulate the environment become available after 10 or 15 hours. It's always exploding barrel, chemical barrel, oil barrel, fire. I mean, there's some other little things, don't get me wrong, for sure, but those are certainly the main ones. And that's how it is the whole way through, and that's kind of a bummer. Where some diversity might have emerged is in the character-specific abilities that you unlock as you play. The Pigman is focused on headbutting stuff, and he can become bulletproof, and the Native American character can summon a bear spirit to fight by his side. These abilities are all interesting in their own way, but here in Weird West, the combat puzzle itself isn't interesting, so different ways to solve that puzzle don't save it. I do think there's a fundamental issue with the way this game handles RPG and progression. It's very unsatisfying because of how little it changes or improves your gameplay experience, which in turn makes you very reluctant to explore for more resources to feed this RPG economy. By the end of Chapter 2, you've got most of the essential perks, you've got enough ability points stockpiled to purchase the essential abilities, you've got some stronger weapons that'll do the job, you realize that money doesn't mean anything so you aren't chasing it, you're fully stocked up on consumables. For me, whenever I play a game and I find myself just stockpiling perk and ability points in my menu, that tells me that the RPG progression systems are not working as intended. And after Chapter 2, I was often sitting on fat stacks of points that I would just dump anywhere because I had nowhere else better to put them, and then spending them made no appreciable impact on my gameplay experience. Without the desire for more perks, more weapons, more money, I didn't feel the need to complete bounties or explore, especially given that these activities only netted me resources that I had already held in great surplus. So obviously this is pretty critical commentary, but I want to come back to what I said at the beginning, which is that all of this is fine. It has everything that was promised, it all works, it's fine. But it's no more than that. It's a very surface level jab at each of the gameplay styles it's adopting, and I really found myself thoroughly bored of the game's combat by the end of Chapter 2. So just to get ahead of some of the comments I expect to get on this review, I did not walk into this expecting Dishonored or Prey, but isometric with cowboys and from a newly formed indie studio. If you've watched me in the past, you'd know that I play a lot of indie games. I know what to expect from them, so my complaints here aren't about, oh, they made Dishonored and now they make this, what's up with that? That's not what this is about at all. My issues with the game are with the game itself, not its budget or its camera angle or whatever. I do think that there was a lot of promise inherent in this premise. The schlocky, pulpy combo of cowboys and the occult has produced some really great games in the past. Hell, look at Hunt Showdown, which is fucking incredible, but for very different reasons than Weird West was going for. But I do think that that's an instructive comparison, because Hunt has no cutscenes, no story, no nothing, and even then I was vastly more sold on and immersed in that world than I ever was with Weird West, even with 20 hours of characters and quests and dialogue and lore books and the whole kit and caboodle. The Weird West does not incite imagination or inquisitiveness, since nothing you encounter feels like it has any roots, and just as soon as you encounter any part of it, the curtain falls and is raised again on a new, unrecognizable, largely disconnected act. The same skin-deep approach applies to its gameplay, which reaches for a combination of genres and subgenres without ever nailing any one of them and bringing almost no innovation to the table. Obviously, this is a day one Game Pass release, and that changes the way we talk about and review games, since it costs you almost nothing to try a game, except time. And increasingly, when I'm reviewing games, I'm thinking, is this worth your time? I would say no. 20 hours, I really had to push through those last 10. I don't walk away from this experience feeling any affection for it. I don't look at any part of it and hope that it's carried forward into another game or a sequel. As I've mentioned, it's not bad, but I certainly don't think it's good. And there are plenty of other games out now, both similar and dissimilar, that would be more worthy of your time. So I know we've all seen Ridge Wallet on other YouTube channels. They're big into the whole influencer marketing thing. Truth is, I actually bought a Ridge Wallet maybe 2 years ago, and I've been using it every day since. For real, it's been my go-to wallet because I really like the sleek, minimalist design, the flat profile, and the durability. So I get an email the other day from Ridge Wallet, and they're like, hey, what's up? Wanna do a Ridge Wallet shout out? And I'm like, hell yeah, because this is a product that I know, and I use it, and I like it. So they sent me some new wallets to check out in some different colors. I got the very Batman-esque carbon fiber 3K weave and a matte black one made out of titanium. This one though is the one I really like. It's called North Shore, and I don't know why I like this one so much. I just do. I think it reminds me of those Japanese wave paintings, you know the ones. Anyway, Ridge wallets can hold all of your cards, well, within reason, and they have different options for the back, including both a money clip and an elastic money strap. I prefer the strap personally. They're just an extremely comfortable and durable means of keeping your cards and cash safe. Those bulky leather wallets, I can't imagine going back to one of those now. These just sit so much more comfortably on the body, you notice it less, and they just look cooler, I think. If you'd like to grab one for yourself, then of course, I've got a discount code for you. It's offer code SKILLUP at purchase. You can drop that in over at ridge.com/skillup. Links in the description and in the top comment. You can spoil yourself with one of those things, but I find they also make really good gifts since it's the sort of upgrade that most people don't even think about, but when they get it, they're like, oh, hey, that's cool, thanks. That's offer code SKILLUP at ridge.com/skillup. Thanks Ridge for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.